thank you everybody for dialing in. Yeah, my name is Carl, and with me today, I do have a broader team, both from Google and from our partner Sears. So we will be covering some topics on Anthos and Dora in order to help your organization in your transformation. Okay, so the topic of today is essentially Anthos, Migrate, and Dora. And the speakers are, I'll start with the rightmost first. So Andrew, you want to go ahead and just briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Carl. So my name is Andrew Hashka, and I look after the application modernization practice for Asia Pacific. I'm based in Sydney, and I guess I meet with a lot of customers and executives all across Asia Pacific, and the main problem that they're all trying to solve, beyond just data center refresh and lift and shift of workloads, is adding innovation to the applications that run your business. So things like moving away from monolithic architectures to microservices, moving away from virtual machines to containers and clouds, moving away from traditional waterfall approaches to DevOps. And that's really what this event is about. How do we help you automate that level of innovation? How do we help you move from the more traditional basics of the applications that you're running today and run on a modern platform facilitated by a modern culture? So Carl will be touching on Dora, which is the DevOps Research Assessment organization that we acquired that covers DevOps culture and how you can transform using that. So definitely, very grateful that you're all here. Please ask questions. We're really keen to work with you and with SIRS to help your modernization journey in 2021.
Thanks, Andrew. You want to go next, Naman?
Yeah, thanks, Carl. So hi everyone, this side Naman. So I'm a senior DevOps engineer here in CS Co-Sourcing Private Limited. So I'm at the backend side of the team right now, and yeah, so I'll basically work at the deployment side to automate the things in the applications. So yeah, thanks for joining the event.
Hey everybody, this is Umesh. I'm a lead cloud architect with Sears. I work with cloud engineering and data engineering teams. Welcome to the event.
Cool. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'm Carl. I sit in partner engineering Southeast Asia, working with our eminent partners from Sears and our customers in the region. Super happy to be here and share with you today. So yes, I will go ahead and share my screen. Just bear with me while I try to find the tab here. Okay. So I hope everyone can see my screen. And before I go ahead and present the deck, I will just pose a question here to hear from you what your experience is like. So please put a 0 in the chat if you have never been through a transformation or modernization, and put a 1 if you in any of your organizations have been through some form of transformation in the past. This is just to get like check the temperature of the audience and how many of us have like extensive experience from transformations, or you may be are all here to learn about transformations. Okay, so I see a couple of ones. So yeah, the chat is up in the right corner in Hangouts Meet. You press on the chat bubble and then you can type in your answer there. So while you're doing so, I'll go ahead and present my screen. So for those of you who have been through transformations, you probably have experienced in the past that many times you will need to balance between speed, stability, and I would also add security to this, okay? And in the presentation today, we will share with you how you can take an approach using Dora from Google to actually tackle all of these three things: speed, stability, and security, without having to compromise on any of them, okay? And you may wonder first, why should I care about like transformations at all, and why should I care about this Dora thing that Google has to share with me? So there are studies out there that shows that high-performing teams do not excellent only in what is their day-to-day tasks, but they also help organizations to do very well financially. Okay, and it's not about only tangible matters such as maybe the profitability of the company, but it's also around your CSAT scores. It's about what your customer reputation, and achieving the greater goals of the organization. Okay, so these are just factual information of how high-performing teams and high-performing organizations do. When you go over a transformation, for those of you who put the ones, you probably have, like in the past, been either seen some of these stages or maybe all of them. It's very complex and very challenging. You may wonder, okay, so where do I actually start my journey, or your organization? And what metrics should we look at? Secondly, like, how do we measure the progress of our transformation? And should we adopt DevSecOps, or should we adopt some other working methodology? How should we actually go, like, pull the transformation through, and how should we organize our teams at a department level, at a higher organizational level, and so forth? Okay. And fourthly is around, like, driving cultural change. So cultural change is something that is very, very important, and maybe the most complex, challenging thing to actually drive a change around. So when I was with the bank last time in DBS Bank building the clouds, so the technology and the processes is one thing, but changing people and get everybody on board is arguably the biggest challenge. And lastly, how do you maintain visibility, control, and consistency for not only for your developers, but for the greater organization? And how do you keep everybody up to speed on the latest technology? So Google acquired Dora in 2018. Okay, and the scale that we have operated at here in Google in the past is like very, very, I mean, it has posed a lot of challenges that other organizations face maybe slightly later, and that have forced Google to develop a lot of best practices for software delivery, software reliability, and how we operate and run and scale our software. Okay, so like just to give you some numbers, for instance, we have like 12 million builds a day. Okay, or 650 million test cases that get executed every day. Or we process 2.5 exabytes of logs every month, or parse 14 quadruple millions of monitoring metrics. Okay, so that's really the scale that we operate at. And some of these practices that we have developed over time have been creating a framework called CAMP. Okay, so CAMP essentially is an approach to leverage Dora that is an assessment plus an iterative approach with Google's best practices. We have an opinionated way of how we wish to do DevSecOps and how we build software and CI/CD and so forth. The CAMP framework will be an iterative approach to leverage Dora in an opinionated way of releasing software from Google. Okay, moving on here. So for those of you who are new to Dora, Dora is an assessment, and the assessment is predictive. So what does that mean? It means that if your organization or you wish to have any of these desired outcomes to the right, so the outcomes are to the right here where you see the cursor, better culture and work environment, or you want to drive better software delivery, operational performance, or like change your organizational performance and so forth. Dora will link this back to what are the things that you need to change in your organization. So it's essentially a questionnaire that will be shared with your organization and the individuals. They answer a couple of multiple choice questions, and then the Dora framework will give you where you need to drive the change, essentially what your weaknesses are. Okay. The ways you can use Dora is, for instance, through a quick check, which we will be sharing with you shortly. And I think one of the slides covers the quick check. And you can do this quick check on your own online, like right after this meeting, if you wish, or at your convenience. It's just 5 like simple questions, and you just answer, and you will get a response back from Dora. Or you can have an engagement. Okay, so an engagement, for instance, working with Google and Sears, and do a Dora assessment plus a workshop. And as I mentioned earlier, CAMP is the more full-fledged choice if you wish to really drive transformation in your organization. Okay, so then it starts with obviously with the assessment of DORA first, and then after the workshop and the assessment, there will be an iterative approach to apply some of the Google's best practices for driving software delivery. Okay, and releasing features and capabilities to your customers. And then this approach will be iterative so that you can continuously improve. The CAMP cycle, as I mentioned, it consists of multiple phases. It starts with measuring and then assessing, planning, and improving. It is a continuously improvement cycle, essentially, where you are taking some of the best know-how that we have built in-house for our own services that we also publicly expose our customers to. Many times we get a question from customers and partners like, how do I become like Google? How do I run the software like you do? How come that you can release so many times every day? And how are you so reliable? Like when I want to test my internet, I always go to google.com and it just works, you know? So if you want to learn some of these best practices, I would suggest that you consider the CAMP engagement cycle. So when you apply the CAMP methodology, it's not only about the development team. Typically, when you release software, people will think about the development teams only. But there's also the operations teams who want things to be reliable and performant. And sometimes there's you throw things over the fence, right? You throw something over the wall, please deploy this or like run this software and scale it out. And nobody want to like touch it, you know. So how do you make sure that you can fulfill the requirements of every persona and every department that you see here on this slide, and still be able to release software at a high pace? Okay, that is like reliable and scalable. I mean, not uncommon when you release software in a larger organization. Many times people like see security as like a afterthought, you know, and it may like slow down your release cycles. While we believe that security should definitely be part of your software development, and DORA takes this into consideration as well, and the CAMP framework. Okay, so if you wish to do a quick test, please go to the website. You can actually just Google, take DORA quick test, or you can just paste. If Andrew, you can please paste the link in the chat as well. For anybody who is keen, you can please go to this link and have a look on your own. It's like quite straightforward. It's 5 questions, as I mentioned earlier, with a few like simple asks. And this is not the full-fledged DORA assessment. So if you wish to do the full-fledged for your organization, please reach out to Mega and the Sears team after this call, and we will work with Sears closely, so both Google and Sears will be helping you. Okay. And lastly, before I wrap up the part on DORA, we have ran DORA for many customers, and some of them are mentioned here, Capital One and Verizon. And DORA really will give you a lot of transparency on how you're doing. I'll give you a concrete example. If I come from a large, I don't know, bank, or I come from a large manufacturing company, and I want to assess my organization and know how am I doing in comparison to my peer group, DORA will help you to do that. Okay. We have assessed more than 35,000 people already, so there's a lot of data. And once you do the assessment, you will get a very clear idea of where you need to focus. Okay, so I will stop sharing my screen here and hand back over to Umesh, who will be taking us through Anthos and migrations with Anthos.
Thanks, Carl. Let's start sharing the screen. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining. I will take you through what Anthos as a platform is, what would be the deployment landscape, and how do we modernize application, what is application modernization, and the components about Anthos, and a small demo to end the things. So I'll go through some of the facts, something that comes out of a marketing study. So 94% of the CIOs indicated that business leaders depends upon technology team for improved agility and faster time to market. So you look at your role in your company and you see that you're not doing much, but again the CIOs are indicating that it all depends upon the technology teams to improve the overall agility of the teams. Now, 80% of the CIOs admitted that businesses who don't have agility, they did not attain to the desired business outcomes. So yeah, these are some of the numbers that I wanted to put across. Now, technology teams fail at transformations due to lack of flexibility and agility. And the reason is simple because you cannot, you're not sure how much downtime your applications are going to have, how much underutilized resources you're using today in your infrastructure. There are the refresh cycles of your applications, of your infrastructures are long. They are timely wrong, and then you need to understand that the existing talent that you have, you need to retrain them, and then you have to hire new talent. So until unless your organization is aligned with what is coming new, uh, there are more chances that you fail rather than you succeed. Now, organizations are adopting to these newer technologies. This is from a study done in 2019, wherein 9 out of 10 enterprises today are operating in a hybrid environment. 75% of the workloads, this is a huge number, they're still on-premise. Well, 87% of the organizations will be running their applications in a container-based systems. And then, 59% of the people are looking for modernizing their applications, not just by the means of lift and shifting, which means it involves a piece of modernization in between. Well, Anthos is a platform for application modernization. Google had a history of managing application orchestration, application modernization via different tools, and Anthos is one of those offerings which was introduced recently. So with Anthos, you can manage your resources not just on Google Cloud, but on other public clouds, on edge networks, as well as on-premise. Well, Google has been named a leader in multi-cloud container development platform. So there are multiple, challenges that you see, containers that you see, but Google has been ranked uh, in the top quadrant with Red Hat, IBM, right? Now, with what kind of things that makes Google in the top list? What makes it leader, right? So Google has experience, the platform experience of running this infrastructure. So as simple as Carl said, you want to check your internet is working or not, you do a simple Google search. So they know how to manage data at scale. They know the platform that they're running. Everything on Google Cloud, like Google as a company, runs on containers. So the scale of cloud native development apps that is happening, the platform operations that are happening, the open source contributions that are coming out of Google. Overall, the support system for container-based applications, container-based platforms in Google Cloud is really, really high. It receives a score of 4 out of 5. Now, what are the advantages of Anthos? And before we go into details about what Anthos consists of, so you manage your applications anywhere. You have the portability feature available with you. You can port out of Google Cloud any day you want. You can port into, or go back to your on-premise systems as you wish. Right, so you deliver softwares faster because since you're running your applications on Kubernetes, then you have support of open source softwares, and then you're using modern DevOps technologies. All of this support is around the Anthos as a platform. Then since you are running a piece of your infrastructure already on Google Cloud, you can bring analytics and AI services, which are one of the key strengths of Google Cloud, closer to your infrastructure, which means that you can still run your core applications on premise, at the same time take advantages of AI ML services from Google Cloud, and then automate your security. Policy as a code, something that I'm going to talk about next in the slides. It's something, again, you're automating security. You're not hard coding any configs in your infrastructure. You're enforcing security for all the clusters in your infrastructure in one go. So overall, these are the benefits of using Google Cloud Anthos. Now, Anthos is a default choice and should be a default choice for your modern application development as well, because it supports serverless. It supports all the open source tools that are available. We spoke about automated security, how we are delivering analytics and AI ML services, bringing AI ML services closer to your infrastructure. Now, well, this like sort of puts together all the features that we just spoke about. How do we, securely manage our infrastructure? How do we reduce our TCO? And how do we openly port our applications to cloud? So Anthos sort of is a one single platform that has integrations with all of these things. Now, one thing that you always want to look at when you're modernizing is, without being logged in. So for all the components of either its container management or a policy management or your operations piece of it, it's all open source. So you have Knative for running serverless workloads, you have Istio for service mesh, and you have Kubernetes as your infrastructure operator. So people who have used Anthos in migrating their applications, modernizing their applications, I'm putting forward some of the notes there. So they've seen 13x improvement over the time, for their applications to basically the kind of time to market they took is improved significantly. The economics of Anthos, if you look at this, so these are some numbers. So you get 4x return on investment by deploying your applications via Anthos. Your modernization, timeline increases a significant 75%. Your productivities are increased. Your improvement time to market is increased. So yeah, some of the numbers here. Well, I think I spoke about this. So you have a freedom of modernizing your application with one more feature called Release Engineer. So Tekton is one open source tool, which is again porting Cloud Build, which is a DevOps tool on Google Cloud for Anthos. Now, I will talk about deployment landscape, how people are deploying applications today, how they were deploying before, and what are the things that you should look for. Now, in an ideal world, you would want to have your cloud native apps and running on a public cloud. So with that, you get your application gets portability, your applications get scalability features, the developers' productivity go high, and you pay for what you use, right? So that's the ideal scenario. This is where you want to be. But how do you reach there? Currently, you might be in different phase of your modernization journey. You might be on-premise running classic apps. There are many disadvantages of having it, but one of the important ones is that they are rigid and they're expensive. You have to do capacity planning. You have to maintain those systems yourself. So this is where you might be in your infrastructure journey. So how do you move from that? So one of the things is that one of the approaches of doing though is lift and shift. So that's the easiest way to approach, but not always the efficient one. Well, there are definitely you get efficient with infrastructure, and then your operations go low. You pay for what you use. You don't have to do any capacity planning, and then of course the security available at Google or any other public cloud for that matter is way more higher than what you can have on your own. So well, that's one of the processes by which you can do a lift and shift, and that's one of the deployment landscapes that are available. Now, the second approach is improve and move. So from on-premise classic apps, you first port them to be cloud native, and then you think about moving them to public cloud. So with that, you probably get something like your applications become portable if you've already ported them to run on containers. They can become scalable independently because you might have already ported them to be microservices based. So yeah, that's the landscape. Moving forward, we will talk about what is application modernization and why do we need it in the first place. So one of the quotes that I really like about is, software's long-term cost is always forgotten. Software engineering as a discipline, if you see, we focus more on building the application and designing the application, and we tend to forget, okay, how do we operate and maintain it? Despite the estimates are that the 40% to 90% of the total cost is incurred after the launch of the application. So if we could just optimize this particular piece in the software development lifecycle after the software is developed, you see that the kind of cost that we can save and the kind of overall RTO that the TCO that we can get it down. So the true cloud ROI comes with application modernization, and as I said, you might be still be traditional app dev, or you might be on cloud with legacy behaviors. The only way to get the true ROI from cloud is that you first approach it, you move your application on cloud with modern behaviors, use open source tools, and then decouple your application, and then a next step further is use Google's best practices, which are available, because Google have experience of running those infrastructure for a very long time. So there are certain frameworks that are available which you could use to get the true ROI out of your application modernization journey. So what are your requirements? Well, you might be looking to push a new feature in hours versus days, right? You might be want to pay for what you're using rather than always doing capacity planning. You might want your applications to be highly available. You want to lower down your vulnerabilities. So your requirements will fall into one of these categories, or it could be something else that can be integrated with these categories. So these are the requirements that when you're looking for modernization that you're having. How do they map with the modernization techniques? So these are the approaches of modernizing your application. First, you decouple your application, you break it into smaller services, because that way it helps you troubleshoot your application faster. It helps you build a new feature faster. Then try to use as much of managed services as possible from the Google Cloud Platform, because that way you will have more time for your teams to focus on what they want to do versus maintaining system. Nobody wants to manage databases now, because that's just a redundant task of taking backups and restoring it. So with that in mind, try to use as much of managed services as possible, and post the operations back to the cloud vendor. Now, we have moved from physical servers to VMs to containers, and the next wave, which again has become normal, is serverless, in which you don't care about infrastructure at all. You just focus on writing code, and then managing the underlying infrastructure is abstracted away to the cloud vendor. So again, anything new that you're deploying, try to see if it can be deployed in a serverless fashion. Well, deploy in such a way, use tools that are portable. Don't lock into tools that probably are not ported, are not portable. So you should be able to redeploy whatever you're deploying now. The final piece and the important piece is DevOps. So with deployment of newer technologies, with use of newer tools, you want to stitch all of them together. And with DevOps, your CI pipelines, your CD pipelines, if they are automated, there are less chance of human error while you're releasing something new. Now, as I said before, Google has like 15 plus years of application orchestration experience. Kubernetes itself came out of a Google project called Borg, and similarly, the overall container piece with launch of C groups, right? That you're familiar with in Linux, process containers that came in again. Likewise, there has been a lot of services that were launched in the application orchestration space by Google, and Anthos is the newest one, which was launched in 2019. Okay, so that was a bit of theory about what Anthos can do and how do we look for modernize our applications. What are the ways? We will talk about Anthos components for the technical folks of what it contains and how it is made up, and then we'll have a small demo. So with Anthos, you can port your modern applications which are already container based to any of the cloud, be it Google Cloud, AWS, or Edge and on-premise, right? At the same time, the legacy applications that we are talking about, which are VM based, can also be ported with a single click via Anthos to the Kubernetes-based infrastructure. So it's a very easy process. Now, Anthos is a 100% software solution, so that updates and new feature releases to the Anthos platform itself is very easy. When I say it's software solution, now it consists of quite a few blocks. These are the core blocks, out of which container management, service management, application development are the main features of it. Now, container management on Anthos is done via Anthos GKE. Service management is done via Anthos Service Mesh, and you can do application deployment via either in a serverless manner via Cloud Run, or you can use GCP Marketplace for third-party offerings which are available as a managed service. You can do policy management via Anthos config management, and you can do logging and monitoring of overall clusters that you're running with Stackdriver logging and management, right? Now, container management via Anthos GKE. How do we manage containers in Anthos? So the service that powers it is Anthos GKE. Before Anthos GKE, what is GKE? So GKE is a enterprise container management service, which is delivering one of the most secure and easy to use Kubernetes implementation. So you can run your resources on Kubernetes-based platform GKE on Google Cloud. So the same engine powers Anthos GKE. The experience of Kubernetes experience is consistent across normal GKE if you've used it before, and Anthos GKE, with an added advantage that it's a single pane of glass for management of multi-cluster environments. So your cluster might be running on AWS, your cluster might be running on-premise on a VMware-based setup, or is it somewhere else? You can manage them from a central place. So that's the container management piece of Anthos. Now, well, as much as application decoupling is helping in troubleshooting, what is going wrong and managing your infrastructure in a better way, it also introduces some challenges as to how do you communicate between a large number of microservices that you might have deployed. How do you securely manage them, and how do they interact with outside world, and how do they interact internally? So for that, we have something called Anthos Service Mesh, which is powered by the open source tool called Istio, which is an industry standard for connecting, securely managing, controlling, and observing your applications, right? How traffic gets into your infrastructure. So with Anthos Service Mesh, you can manage all your services, across clusters in a very simple and seamless manner. Well, we spoke about how do we manage cluster, like container management is done, how do the service mesh is handled. Now, how do you do development on Anthos, and how does Anthos help you with new application development, right? So Cloud Run is one service which is based on Knative. Knative is an open source tool for deploying serverless infrastructure on Kubernetes. So Cloud Run is a managed service of based on Knative. So you can, anything new that you want to develop, you can use Cloud Run on top of Anthos to run your code essentially. So you just develop your code and run it with Cloud Run, and you get the consistent performance of the same Cloud Run that you have for normal Google Cloud. Now, Anthos is Cloud Run is available both on Anthos, and it is also available as an independent service in Google Cloud. So if there is something smaller that you want to test out and you are in the Google Cloud ecosystem, you can use Cloud Run as an independent service. Or if you're coming from on-premise world and from some other cloud vendor, you can run it on top of Anthos. Now, moving forward, right, we will talk about Anthos config management. So Anthos config management is one of those features of Anthos that kind of stands Anthos out of all the other competitors in the market. Because with Anthos config, we are introducing something called policy as a code. So you do not have to hard code your configurations in your infrastructure anymore. They're completely managed as code, and you can, so so think about it. You are running 3 clusters, 3 production clusters, all on 3 different places, but there are certain security policies that you want to enforce, which are common across all infrastructure. So rather than doing them manually by going to one of the clusters, you do it with a single dashboard. You do it with a single policy code. So you write it once and then you deploy it to all the cloud wherever it is running. Again, the policy management it's a YAML based file. There are some pre-validation checks that are available out of the box. You can integrate it with any of your SCM tool that you might be using. With that, we will move to how do we do DevOps with Anthos, and what are the things that are available. Now, this picture depicts, there are different phases of DevOps lifecycle that you might have. It might be just developer and operations. You might be using DevSecOps, wherein security is also one of the things that you're doing. Now, the purpose here is to demo you that there are various tools available at each stage of your application development, application deployment, and then managing your application. So be it your developers, be it your operators, or be it your security team, all of them are supported by various tools in the Anthos ecosystem to achieve a automated CI/CD with Anthos. Well, I will just talk about a few easy integrations that are available. So from a source code repository standpoint, you have GitHub available, you have GitLab available, and there are some other ones available as well. So I'll just talk about some of the industry standard ones that you might be looking for. So Jenkins is available both as a build and test tool as well as a deploy tool. Well, there is Travis CI and Circle CI also available. Same is the case for artifact management, wherein you can use something like AWS S3 if you're coming from AWS. You can use something like Docker Hub, or you can use Artifact for that matter. And for deploying, for the CD piece of it, Spinnaker is the default choice available, and you also have a choice to use, AWS code pipeline or Jenkins for that matter. Well, the last piece of Anthos 2 components is the logging and monitoring piece of it, which is so Stackdriver is now known as Operations Suite. All the services that you see on your screen, they are a overall platform to monitor, troubleshoot, and improve your application performance on Google Cloud environment. So there are different features of different services which you can take advantage of. Be it cloud logging, which can help you understand what logs are getting generated, and cloud monitoring with what resources are consumed and how, what is happening in your application. So all those traces are available to you. With that, I'll talk about, so we spoke about lift and shift. We spoke about, move and improve. So there is one more play that we can introduce with Anthos Migrate. So which is lift and modernize. So in a single step, you can lift your application out running on a virtual machine, directly run on Kubernetes container-based platform without actually putting in any labor hours. So with Anthos Migrate, your application can be running on a Windows-based environment or a Linux-based environment, completely on a virtual machine-based setup. And with Anthos Migrate, you can move it to a Kubernetes-based setup, and the deployment file, Docker file, all of them are generated by Anthos Migrate. So Anthos Migrate is that tool which helps you migrate your application from VMs to containers, which we will show in a small demo. Now, with all the features and with the kind of feature set that we spoke about, with Anthos, hybrid is done right. It's a software-based stack, which means there is no hardware purchase required for you, and then it is automatically deployed. Anything new that we figure out might not be working for you, or there are new feature requests that needs to come in, all can be done in hours versus months, because it is a software solution. Again, it is built on open source platforms, so the portability piece of it is really good. All the names that we just saw, be it Knative, be it Istio, all of them are open source tools. Everybody is using them, so the portability piece is very good. Again, you're focusing on building your applications and not managing your infrastructure. So your infrastructure is completely abstracted away from you. Well, migration journeys will be dynamic. No single strategy will work for you, depending upon which space you are in your modernization journey. Some of your workloads will be lifted and shifted. Some of will require lift and optimize. Some will be optimized only after migrated to cloud. So depending upon where you are, Anthos can be a great help with respect to modernize and migrate in a single step. Now, before I move to the demo, just one small picture. So at Google, everything runs in a container. On an average, Google runs 4 billion containers per week. And that's a huge number. So they should definitely know how to orchestrate them. And that's why the kind of tools that are coming out of Google are great. Over to you, Naman, for demo.
Perfect. Thanks, Umesh. So shall I screen my screen? Oh,
yeah.
Cool. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So I will walk you through the demo of Anthos Migrate. So we have a Tomcat-based sample application running on VM in Compute Engine. So it is basically running on public IP on port 8080. Yeah. So this is a default page of the sample application. So basically, we will be containerizing this application running on VM using Anthos. So let's move on to the Anthos console and see how it works. Yeah, so Anthos console is having various sections in it. Since we are migrating from VM, so we'll use the migrate to container tool here. This migrate to container tool is having various sections in it, starting from right to left. We'll first go to the processing cluster. So processing cluster is something, it's a normal GKE cluster with the Anthos tool installed in it. So basically right now what we'll be doing is we'll be adding the cluster and configuring this processing cluster. First, before configuring any processing cluster, we have to select the workload type. This workload type is basically a application where your application is running, whether it is a Linux or Windows. So we'll select the Linux one, and then you have to select the cluster that you have deployed. It's a normal cluster. So let me select a normal cluster. It's a Hello World GKE. Once I select the next, it will ask you to configure all the, so basically these are the bunch of commands that you have to configure in your cluster to run the Anthos in GKE, basically. So once you run all these commands, you have to just apply it. And you can see here, the processing cluster is in the ready state. Then you'll go to the sources part. So this sources part, you have to select the add the source. Here you have to select the processing cluster that you had configured in previous step. For example, I had selected this one. And then you have to name the source name. For example, I had given it to be the demo 5. And you have to select the source type. Source type is something where our application is running, whether it is a Compute Engine in GCP or somewhere else in other cloud. It is a VMware, AWS, Azure, and anything basically. Then you have to select the next, and it will ask you to configure the service account for it. This service account will be helpful to provide these two roles for the compute viewer and compute storage admin. Compute storage admin will be useful to store the artifacts that it will generate in the last step. Once you go to the next and then add the source, it will add source for you. Yes, so it is completed. Once the source is added, you have to go to the final step of the migration. This final step of the migration, you have to create a migration. There you have to give the migration name. For example, I had given demo migration 1. And then you have to select the source that you had configured in previous step. Once you select the source, it will ask you to give the OS type where your application is running or where the migration will be happening, whether it is a Linux or Windows. Then you have to give the VM ID. This VM ID is something that where your application is running initially. You have to give that particular ID here. And then you have to give the migration intent. This migration intent depends on application to application you have to provide. Since our application is standalone, then I'll give the image. And then I'll just create a migration. But right now, so this migration steps take a bit time. So we had already prepared a one migration step for you. So this is a migration step. Here you can see, so okay, so basically in this step, it automatically generates artifacts out of it and store it in a GCS bucket. Also, you can review the artifacts and download the artifacts YML files on your own as well. But yeah, so it's stored in the GCS bucket in this form, basically. So these are the 4 files that it basically generates. First one is the Docker file. Docker file is a normal application file that Anthos generates out of it. And then it's a deployment spec file. This deployment spec file is having all the application related information that you have to deploy in cluster. Then it's a manifest file. Manifest file is having all the information related to artifacts that is actually generated. And then it's a migration.yml file. This migration.yml file is having all the information related to migration that is work from VM to the cluster. Yeah, so let's deploy the deployment.spec file first. And let's see how it works. So we had already copied the deployment.spec file in our Cloud Shell. So these are files that are already copied. So let's deploy and see how it works. Okay. Yep, it is deployed, and let's see. Yeah, so this is working fine. And then let's see the service. Yeah, so service is also there on the type load balancer, which will give our public IP. Then now see if it is work fine or not. Yeah, so we can see here it is working perfectly fine that we had seen in the VM as well. So yeah, so from this we can establish that it is very easier to migrate from the VM to the or containerize from the VM to the cluster without any much manual work. So yeah, that's it from the demo side. Now over to Umesh.
Sure. Thanks, Naman. The demo was really small and short. We couldn't keep it for a little longer. But again, the purpose here to show you is that it's very simple and it's easy to move away from VMs and port your applications to containers. I will talk about a small case study and then we'll take it forward. Yeah, so we're working with one of the banks in the Southeast Asia region where they were having their infrastructure running on premise. They wanted to look at migrate to cloud, right? And they wanted a easy way by which they can keep some of their core applications still running on premise, and anything new that they're deploying can be deployed to Google Cloud. So they were having capacity planning issues because they have to invest a lot in the capex. They were unable to scale at the desired rate with the current platform that was required for them, and then they wanted to run again the core apps still on premise for legal requirements. So for them, we used Anthos, and we migrated some of the non-core applications to GKE. Well, we modernized one legacy C++ based application to cloud via Anthos, and then we have set up their end-to-end DevOps pipeline via the tools that I mentioned. Jenkins and Spinnaker were the two tools used there. The business impact that they had was their capex cost went down that they had to do, and then they had a better overall manageability and lower operational overhead for the infrastructure. With that, I will talk a little bit about CS. So CS is a 14 years old company. We have won multiple Google Partner of the Year awards over the years. And, we are serving 3,000 plus customers and partners throughout the world. We have presences in multiple locations throughout the world.
Thank everybody for dialing in and staying with us today. We love to hear back from you. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.